there's a solution to every problem. And in my mind, that is a hard thing to instill in others and to recognize for myself. When I'm in a tough situation, all I want to do is, get out of it. How are we going to deal with it? Oh no, stress is high. But if you, again, sit back and think it through, I do think that there's a solution out there. We just have to find it.
Welcome to another episode of On Record PR. I'm the executive producer and guest host, Jennifer Simpson Carr. Today, I'm going on record with Dena Calo, Executive Vice President of Human Resources and Employment Counsel for the Durst Organization. Dena is a practical and seasoned HR strategist, leadership coach, and employment lawyer. She leads the Durst Organization's overall human resources strategy through collaboration with business and operations leaders. Welcome to the show, Dena.
Thank you so much for having me, Jennifer. It's my pleasure.
I'm so excited to have reconnected with you just a few years ago at a legal industry event. And we had the pleasure of working together many years ago at a small firm, which kind of was the start of my career. So it's been great to watch your success and reconnect recently.
Thank you. I can say the same for you. It's really been my pleasure. And I like that we're connected and talking again.
Yes. So can you tell our listeners who may not be familiar with the Durst Organization a little bit about the company?
The Durst Organization has been in existence over 100 years and was started, it's a family real estate company in New York City. They own, operate, manage some of the most sustainable high-rises in the country. And we handle both commercial and residential. And then there are some interesting sort of arms that are breaking out from the main company. So Durst Ventures is another part of the organization. And they recently, I don't know if you saw it, but they're the new robotic window washer invention came out of Durst Ventures, and we're hoping it is very successful. And what I can say is it at least makes me less nervous to think of a robot outside my window instead of a person, because that really gets me nervous every time I see it.
Oh, I can imagine. And certainly any organization that's investing, in venture or the future is really forward-thinking and innovative. So I'm guessing that that's been your experience at the company.
So it is. I think we always, we're in a somewhat of a difficult time right now for commercial real estate with financing issues and that sort of thing. And one of the things that I've loved since I started here in January is that forward thinking, strategic thinking on how to manipulate in challenging times and exceed or excel in better times. So it's been an interesting learning experience for me, and I'm really excited about it.
So that leads me to one of my questions, which I find so interesting. You spent a majority of your career as a private practice attorney, which, as I mentioned earlier, is how we met, and then transitioned into this role. So I'm curious if you could just share with our listeners what the journey was like for you transitioning from private practice to the role you're in now.
So first I want to say I always wanted to be a lawyer. I thought I was going to retire being a lawyer in a law firm. And, it's interesting how your life evolves, right, as time goes on. So I'm going to say about 10 years ago, while working for a smaller firm than the big firm I was ultimately in at Saul Ewing. But when I was working at a smaller firm, I got the assignment to come to the Durst Organization 3 days a week and help them with an investigation. And then I ultimately stayed in the role here until they found a new individual to take on the role that had been vacated. So I was here for about a year and a half. And that was my first of all, for the lawyers out there who don't have business experience, I think that year and a half really taught me 10 years worth of business knowledge. Like it just being in a business versus being in a law firm is so different, but it helps with your counseling of clients, right? When you understand what they're doing. So when I left that firm, I really thought to myself, because of the experience, maybe I want to go in-house. There'd been so much, as much as I love the law, there's a lot of challenge, whether it's my partners or opposing counsel. I was a litigator. So opposing counsel, judges, the justice system just never seemed to meet my expectations, which, maybe they're high, but still. And so at that time, I actually started thinking about going in-house, whether it be legal or otherwise. And there was a recruiter that I dealt with at the time. I was down on the law. I was sort of down on how being a partner and how you bring in business. I was down on a lot of stuff related to the law at the time. And this recruiter, I have to say, really sort of changed my path because she got me to be introspective about why I was leaving the law, why I wanted to leave the law, turned me around. And actually, I worked with her to get a position at a big law firm, national. And I was scared at the time. Am I going to have business? How am I going to get business? Like I'd always done marketing, but I never really knew at the firms I was at prior what I was bringing in. And, that's another issue with law, with especially bigger law, is that there's not a lot of transparency into certain things, compensation being one of them. Anyway, so I was there for 10 years and I couldn't be happier that I had that experience. From my perspective, I learned how a law firm operates. I learned how to get business. I was really successful in getting business, but the frustration continued, right? Law firms, in my mind, and again, my limited experience, I've worked at 4, they're just different in how they create leaders in the organization and support leaders in the organization. So I worked there 10 years and ultimately that led to this role. It was a very interesting experience because as much as I'd been talking about it going in-house, I really hadn't done anything, right? I hadn't put out any resume, nothing. And then last year, about this time, I got a call from the Durst Organization and they said, we're going to have an opening in our lead HR role. We would like you to come talk to us. One thing led to another, and here I am as Executive Vice President of Human Resources and Employment Counsel, and I am having so much fun doing it. I really am.
I'm so happy to hear that. And a couple of things that you said really resonated with me. One, the impact the recruiter had on you and your career. We're all lucky when we find someone or people who can really change our perspective or help us kind of see beyond the frustrations that we're in. So that's an amazing experience, I'm sure. And also that the Durst Organization contacted you. I mean, what an impact that you must have had in the time that you were there. So that's incredible.
Thank you.
And it sounds like you're having a great time. So can you tell our listeners more about what it's like being in business and kind of a leader in the business at the Durst Organization?
Yeah, it's one of the things, I think you don't see things until you're past them and can look back, right? That's when you really can see and analyze a situation. And from my perspective, although I was at the last law firm I was at, I was out of the employment litigation group. I was the head of the women's group. I was counsel for the firm on employment matters. Yet, while that all sounds like I was in leadership, I really wasn't. Like, I just felt like anytime there was an opportunity for me to advance, things changed. And everything's so discretionary. So from their perspective, they were supporting me and doing what they needed. Now, fast forward, I come here as a leader in the organization. I'm leading several teams. I'm working very closely with the COO, president, chairman, every day. And the thing that I've recognized now is I wasn't a leader at the firm I was at. Here, I'm being treated like a leader. That makes me act more like a leader. And it's just nice to have things that you say matter and people listen. And, the strategic focus of the company, especially in harder times, becomes very important. And I think I have already this year played such a significant role in that leadership and in the development of our culture and continuing our culture. So I think for me, like that is what the leading of the organization is like. But the other thing is, this collaboration and transparency, which I know not all companies have, but I think we should strive for, is a key in my mind to a great culture. And here, there's so much of that. Like all the decisions we're making, we're getting in rooms, we're discussing them, we're brainstorming. So it's been very interesting to see the difference between working in an organization and working at a law firm. But not to mention, I have no billables anymore, which to me is like the best thing ever. I used to spend too much time doing my billable. And it's a new experience for me almost every day after 25 years of practicing employment law to come in-house and now be leading and, doing all of the things with an eye toward the law, but it's not legal work. And I feel like I'm really thriving in it.
That's amazing. And certainly transparency and collaboration are key components, I think, of success for an organization and for team members feeling valued at all levels. I'm curious, in your role, since you oversee so many teams and HR is your primary responsibility, there's a lot that's been going on in the world since you started at the Durst Organization. And people can kind of fill in the blanks with all of the different things that we're seeing on the news and being challenged with every day as humans and as professionals. How have you, in your role as HR, really helped the organization and the people kind of navigate some of the challenging times that people are facing?
Again, I think it all comes back to communication and collaboration. So from my perspective, we've had some of those issues, not a ton in the time I've been here. It's only been 10 months. But with the issues that sort of the current events issues that are occurring, we try to stay ahead of it. We try to let people know that while the workplace is not a place for political discussion or the tense political issues that we may be seeing or hearing or whatever that might be or whatever's going on in the world, I do think it's important for us to always connect with each other on what may be bothering us or not bothering us. And I have an open door. So, and another good thing about Durst is there's longevity. So people who were here when I was here 10 years ago are still here. So that made it easy for me to get that immediate trust. I think that without that trust factor, it would have taken a longer time to build the relationships up where I can have a conversation with a group and say, look, here's what we're focused on. Here's how we're going to handle this issue, current events, whatever it is. And if you have any questions, come back. So I have ongoing discussions with leadership and the different leaders of the departments about those types of issues and how to handle them.
That's incredible. So, Dena, we're going to pause here for a message from our sponsor. And then when we come back, I'd love to talk to you more about your career and what you've done to support and mentor women.
This episode is brought to you by Furia Ruble Communications, a public relations and marketing agency serving law firms and businesses internationally. With an expert team of professionals positioned throughout the U.S. and supported by international affiliates, Furia Ruble enhances its clients' brands through integrated communications by providing expert guidance in crisis management and high-profile litigation, protecting brand and reputation, and supporting internal marketing teams with media relations, media and crisis training, and client and talent acquisition and retention. To learn more, visit furiaruble.com.
So, Dena, we're back from our sponsor message, and I'm curious, can you tell our listeners about some of the challenges and accomplishments you've experienced throughout your career?
I can. It's a little hard. I've been thinking about sort of how if we were going to discuss this, how I was going to do it. So I think overall, and not here, but in my career as a whole, my biggest challenge was, number one, keeping my mouth shut when I didn't need to talk. Because from my perspective, I always wanted to fight the good fight. If I saw a wrongdoing, and I'm talking about in the firm, in the professional space, I wanted to fix it. But what I've learned is to listen first, take some time, and then sometimes things work themselves out without me ever having to say anything, which is great. But if it doesn't, one of my new mantras is pour love on it. Like, I think you're going to get a lot more when you are dealing with a challenge with positivity and with an acknowledgement that there's always a solution and let's find it. So in the last, I'm going to say 5 years or so, that's really become how I approach almost every challenging situation, because And people around here know that that's one of my mantras. If they're like, okay, we're going to pour love on it, you go ahead, do it. If you do it, it's going to have great success. In that same vein, there's a solution to every problem. And in my mind, that is a hard thing to instill in others and to recognize for myself. When I'm in a tough situation, all I want to do is, get out of it. How we're going to deal with it. Oh no, stress is high. But if you, again, sit back and think it through, I do think that there's a solution out there. We just have to find it. I'm most proud of all of the attorneys that I've mentored over the years. I won a mentorship award in Philadelphia. That is something that really drives me. And you can see the success that you've brought to them and that they have in their careers because of the ongoing mentorship relationship. And I think I wouldn't also have that if I had burned any bridges, which I haven't. So even through the different places I've gone, I've had some interesting timeline. My first law firm that I worked at it was great. I was there about 18 months. And then I left and I went to bigger firms. However, at some point in my career, they called me and said, would you come back? So this is the Durst Organization is actually the second time that I've had sort of this repeat interest, which I see as an accomplishment of how my relationships are formed and kept up. And then at the end, my biggest accomplishment is my kids. So they're one's in college, one just started working in September. And I was busy, right? I was a really busy mom. I can remember from when they were babies, I was the one who traveled. I was the one who, was home late. But I'm so proud of the relationships and I formed with the kids and the way that they've grown up. So it makes me know that you can have both, right? You can have a working life. You can be a busy mom, but still be a mom. And it's funny, we always used to say at the firm, like, this is one of my #bad mom days. And, that happens. And it's okay. It's okay to have a bad mom day. It's okay to be wrapped up in your personal life sometimes. And it's going to happen. So no more #bad mom. We stop that.
That's a great one. I've definitely heard #mom fail, and I've been guilty of those too. And so I'm curious, I think any parent listening, including myself on this conversation, has had those instances where we feel like we're being pulled in so many directions and the mom guilt or the parent guilt is real. What advice would you have to a parent listening who might be struggling with the balance of home and life and all the demands that work places on them?
So a couple of things. One, you have to set boundaries, both in personal and in business. And I failed at that for the first 15 years of my practice. I had no boundaries. And that was back at a time where cell phones weren't as prevalent as they are now. But I always had that feeling of, the client has to come first. And so it could be, a vacation at 2:00 in the afternoon. I get a call, I take it. So setting the boundary of when you say that you're going to be off and being with the family, make that time meaningful and make sure that family and business understand sort of what those boundaries are. That has been really successful for me. It took me a long time to get there, but that was very successful because once the clients or your partners or your peers know that, at 6:00 each night, I'm off and I'm not going to pick up the phone again until depending on the age of the kid, sometimes it's 9:00 at night because I can get back on after the kids go to sleep. Other times it's I'm done at 7 and I'm going to pick it up again at 7 a.m. or whatever it is. But once the individuals you're interacting with know that, it becomes so much easier to manage versus feeling like you're failing all the time because when you're with the kids, you get work stuff. When you're at work, you have kid stuff. Like I just think you need to separate it. Be ready for the unexpected because it always happens. And then I think at the end of the day, we just have to realize that sometimes we need help. And we should get it, whether that's somebody to help clean the house or it's somebody to help a few hours a week with the kids or, somebody at work, a peer of yours that can help give you support for the workplace. Recognizing we don't have to be superhuman and that we're not going to be #bad moms or dads. And at the end of the day, it can be successful and will be successful so long as, we can work it all together. And the most interesting part is a couple of my associates at my former firm just had babies. And one of them, I was on a call with her recently, and she said, I have no idea how anybody does this. She's like, how are you a lawyer? She's like, now I understand. You always seem so, frantic at times, but I heard about the kids, but I didn't realize how hard it is. Give yourself some grace. It is hard, but it gets easier and gets harder. I mean, kids, I think you can say at the beginning it's physically hard. When they're teenagers, it's emotionally hard. And you have to be ready for that too.
Yeah. I think you're giving me a glance into my future. My daughter's only 10 right now. So.
Right. Oh, there you go. It's getting close.
And I think from my personal experience, having other women and parents acknowledge that it's a challenge and that it is hard and that even though people might make it look easy, it's not that way, I think has always helped me. So that kind of ties into something you said earlier, which is your advocacy for other women and your mentorship. So I'm just curious about the work that you've done to support and mentor other women, both during your time in private practice and now, and why it's so important for women to do those things for other women in business.
The fascinating thing for me is when I began as a lawyer, the older female lawyers that I interacted with were not mentors and did not support. In fact, there was a lot of backstabbing going on. And I felt like, and I talked to other lawyers around my age, about female lawyers around my age about this, and the general consensus is you had to be a certain way to succeed in the law practice 30 years ago, or 50 years, however long you want to go back. And so they've brought that forward. And so since those experiences, which were negative, I decided myself, I can never do that to anybody else. Like I need to bring all women to the top versus, squishing them down because I want to be the only women there. So when I started at my last law firm, I immediately joined the Women's Development Initiative. And I found it interesting that what was talked about at that time at those meetings was, in my humble opinion, ridiculous. It was what we're wearing, haircuts, like things like, and I'm like, after the first two meetings, I'm like, are we ever going to talk about what's important, which is how you get business, how we can support each other? Like, what is happening here? And so as time went on, that became the theme of the Women's Development Initiative. In my last year there, I actually led that group with one of my wonderful friends, Ruth. And the feedback that we got, similar to what you just said, knowing that other women have gone through it and have succeeded and are ready to give you tips, those meetings that we had where that was discussed were the best and got the best feedback. Like some junior associates are so frantic to make their partners happy that they want to hear what your experience has been and that you've gotten to this place having gone through all of the phases that they went through. So to me, helping women succeed has become just something I'm very passionate about. Here, what I'm trying to do is really train and develop everybody. I'm not focused only on women, but there are a few groups that I'm going to suggest taking female leaders to events, trainings, things like that, because I'm not trying to be sexist or discriminatory, but we learn a different way. We do things a different way than men, generally. I maybe am overgeneralizing. And an individual that was my coach while I was at the law firm, who I'm still close with, he came in to help a female group that I put together when I first started. And really, I started it because I didn't know anybody. And I was like, hey, do you all want to get together and talk about business development? And they did. And it really turned into a wonderful group. But our leader, this coach that we brought in, who's a man, said several times, like, it's fascinating to him how we lack confidence. He's like, you're a badass. I don't know if I can say that, but you're a badass. Why are you acting like you have zero confidence and you have zero skills? I'm like, I'm not. He's like, you are. And those few years with him opened our eyes. And I'm glad to say the women who were in that have all become partners at the firm. So I felt like I was a big piece of that, but he was a big piece of that too. He really was a great coach. And so to me, seeing women succeed, especially women that you've mentored for a long time, is one of the most fulfilling things that I've engaged in.
That's incredible. And it's such an important message for anyone in business, but in life, because I personally feel like I wouldn't be where I am without the mentors who took me under their wing or saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And I'm so glad that you and I have kind of kept in touch, because you were someone when we worked together who I always respected so much and, valued running into you in the hallway or, working with you when we had the chance. So thank you for sharing that experience. I am so glad we had the chance to talk today. I want to thank you again for joining me. I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. I encourage you to visit our website, onrecordpr.com, subscribe to the show, and share it with your friends and colleagues. As always, we welcome your guest and topic ideas. You can send them to podcast@onrecordpr.com. Dena, thank you so much again for joining me and sharing your experiences.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
On Record PR is produced by Jennifer Simpson Carr and Matt Henderson, with support from the team at Furia Rubel Communications. This episode is edited by Željko Tomic of Compost Media Flow.